Okay. All right. All right, I'm going to kick it off, everybody. Thanks for coming. Got a good audience today. Thanks, everybody, for making time. Today, we're going to go over the priming proposal, which everybody's seen and likely read, hopefully. Just so you know, I think I'm screen sharing. You can see some aspects of that proposal in one of the windows. A couple quick protocol items. We're going to go through introductions to the priming team. They're going to talk a little bit about give a very quick overview of the project, the priming history, PDOW history, and then we'll get into proposal updates and then move into discussion. We're going to try to stay focused on various topics. So to help that, we'll kind of prompt questions on topics as we kind of go across them. And we're going to also ask everybody to stay focused to one question at a time so we can cycle through people, give everybody a chance to raise a question and talk. So chat, you can use the chat to answer a question or you can come on stage. Either one's fine. Okay, with that said, let's kick things off. So today from priming and also with priming and PDOW, we've got Rarity and DeFi Ted who are going to take us through the proposal, give us a little history about each organization, their collaboration, and then after kind of touring through the proposal and that history, share a few of the updates they've made based on community feedback to date. And then I'll review the agenda after that to start talking about content and questions to the proposal. So Rarity, Ted, take it away. Introduce yourselves, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. So Rarity Capital, I hope most of you have met me at some point or another. I'm a former co-founder of Priming and current head of product at PDOW. Professionally, I've worked in product management design in the intersection of engineering for the last decade or so. And yeah, just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone in attendance and who has supported the Priming historically. I'll hand things off to Ted for a quick intro, and then I'll talk a little bit about history.
Thank you. I'm Ted. I am co-founder of Paragon's DAO. I've been in crypto for nearly 7 years. I've been full-time for nearly the last 4. I've done a number of other projects in the past, and my professional experience extends from a decade plus at General Electric in C Corp leadership. So that's my background, and I've been part of this parallel ecosystem now for at least the last two and a bit years. So very excited to be here and position this tool for the ecosystem to see and get full use of.
Great, thanks, guys. No, go ahead, Rarity. Sorry, I was just trying to segue. You're good. You're
perfect. All right. So I guess a little bit about where we've come from, and we've covered a little bit of this in the forum discussion thus far. But yeah, I think most of you have probably used the priming.io in some way or shape or form over the past few years or so. And it's been a staple of the community. Big Int and I were co-founders who were attempting to kind of scale this from a very lightweight, static analytics dashboard into something bigger. But unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances as well as just rising costs of the business, it required us to few months ago, about 6-7 months ago, consider shuttering it. Fortunately, Ed, myself, and J Crew kind of crossed paths, and PDOW reached out, and we were able to come to a partnership agreement to save what we thought was a widely loved community resource. And so I was brought aboard as head of product for the DAO. And yeah, since then, we've kind of been heads down with a growing team of what is now 4 people, trying to build the priming into something that is new and improved version of what it used to be. And so yeah, that's a little bit of our background. And today we're super excited to kind of review the proposal that we've been working toward to expedite the launch of the priming. The proposal kind of showcases a lot of these facets, but I think a main piece of this is bringing a previously loved analytics solution into kind of its new form and providing a really core piece of infrastructure for the Echelon community moving forward. I think a component of this that's widely discussed is the sync, and we're super excited to add additional utility for the Prime token and help with Prime velocity in the distribution of the token. Yeah, it's a little bit of our history and a segue into the grant.
Great, thank you. Ted, do you have anything you want to add to this at this point, or do you guys want to just start diving into talking about the proposal overview and the key components of the project?
Look, I think one of the key things is that we identified the priming with Rarity. We'd spoken to begin at Paragon's DAO very early on. So it was something that we'd been discussing in regards to maybe sponsoring them or helping fund them, and it quickly turned into an opportunity for us to help take it over. It is not a cheap or inexpensive tool to run. It is quite a costly cost for us to manage as well, and it was costly for Begin. So I'm glad we're able to take that over with the treasury we have as a community ourselves and be able to provide that back. So hopefully we can go through some of the finer points today and help alleviate maybe some of the concerns and some of the questions that have been raised in the forum today.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Rarity, why don't you take it away and just give us an overview of the proposal, really kind of focusing on what this the project proposal to Echelon and the community will really help accomplish and what you guys are hoping to deliver at a bird's eye view.
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free still, I'm just going to kind of jump through the proposal itself. So if you want to generally scroll along with me, feel free so people in the audience can see. I think just from the jump start here in terms of the overview, the core thing that we're trying to deliver to the community is an asset management and incentivized content hub for Echelon titles. Let's not lose sight of that. The sync is a huge component of that, but ultimately we want to provide a really core piece of infrastructure for the ecosystem to utilize. Secondly, add novel use cases for the ecosystem, prime utility, prime velocity, prime distribution. And then finally, offer mechanisms for new user acquisition and partnerships. I think a lot of what has been discussed in the forum thus far has been really anchored on us potentially expanding outside the Echelon ecosystem. We actually see that as a huge positive and a boon for you guys. And we can touch on that a little bit later. In terms of the actual scope and starting with the Explorer, you guys have used this in different forms on the existing priming website thus far. Traditionally, it's been really siloed to a static view of cards and prime sets. We want to do away with all of that moving forward and give you guys something that's super flexible that can suit a wide variety of use cases for you guys. A few of the highlights there is imputed metadata and gameplay. We certainly think that while financial stuff is really cool and awesome and what the priming used to be focused on exclusively, moving forward as the game launches, its beta comes to fruition, we want to make sure that you can have access to all of that other really rich gameplay data to commingle with financial data to find really unique insights. And so that's going to be a core component of the Explorer moving forward. Some of the more advanced metrics and aggregations. So, hey, how do we allow you to look at some more complex time periods and comparisons and statistical aggregators to go beyond just, hey, what does historical sales look like for an asset? And then finally, some of the visualization types. Most of you guys are familiarized with just the tabular representation of this data, but we're not constrained to that anymore. And so there's some really awesome things that we can do there that enable things like content creation and embedding of those insights into other channels or forums. So that's kind of the Explorer in a nutshell, and happy to field more questions later on. But moving on to the portfolio, we have not yet started work on the front end of this. You can actually go through the proposal and see what our estimated deliveries for the initial versions of each of these are. But the portfolio is really kind of the backbone of what the leaderboard used to be on the priming.io. We see ourselves taking a pretty big step function forward in terms of functionality here in this version. The backbone of this is really kind of valuation and P&L for individual users. So think, hey, how are all the decisions I'm making within GameFi ecosystems contributing to me either gaining or losing money over time? And how might the priming be able to kind of help steer you in the right direction based on some of those decisions? And then finally, a component that is also the asset browser. The asset browser, which is allowing you to understand, hey, which of my assets are where, and how is that contributing ultimately to any cash flow or token flow that we're seeing. And then the last piece here is content. And I think this really ties a bow on everything. I think we've gotten some questions about, hey, why is the priming moving from analytics into content? The simple answer here is not everybody is an analyst. I think we've all benefited from the Lambert spreadsheet from time to time, but How many of us here can actually go ahead and create that spreadsheet from scratch? I don't think everybody. And so we really feel that content kind of rounds out our ecosystem by allowing analysts to democratize insights to the data tooling and the data visuals that they put together. And so how do we take those dashboards and wrap them in some longer short form narrative and distribute those so your everyday gamer can have access to really cool insights without necessarily needing to go utilize all these really hard, or not hard, but these rich analytics tools. So yeah, I mean, and then the rationale is, hey, we really want to partner with the Echelon community. eDAO already has a substantial treasury in terms of Prime. We want to strengthen that relationship. And so a lot of this is oriented around kind of that sync schedule. So how do we provide ongoing and lasting utility to the Echelon community moving forward? Here you can actually see one of the adjustments that we'll talk about a little bit later, but ultimately we see all of these parties, the treasury, the Echelon ecosystem, content producers, and the Paragon's DAO token stakers, all as partners within this ecosystem that is the priming. And so we want to reward those entities all equally. Now, naturally, we've made some changes to hopefully skew things slightly towards Echelon in the immediate term. But this is how we build value alignment across these various partners to build really interesting and novel content that could hopefully boost viewership and serve really as a growth vector for the Echelon community. So how do we allow people to discover new games, build interesting content that attracts new people, and do it all over again? Yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of the proposal.
Awesome. Thank you. Great overview. Really helped lay a base for more conversation. You started to talk about it a little bit. So the last piece of this proposal is just some of the updates based on the ongoing dialogue with the community. Do you want to gloss over in a high-level view what changes have been made since the original proposal, just in case some of the people here have not read that?
Yeah, and I think first off, thanks for the input and the discussion from the community. I think whether it's been in DMs or in the Echelon forum, I mean, that participation and engagement shows that people care, and we're excited to see that. So thank you, first off. Yeah, rarely is the first draft perfect, and so we're going to make iterations on this. But we feel like where we've landed right now is a really reasonable middle ground. I think the first thing that we've kind of noticed here and heard anecdotes of is that folks felt that the percent allocation back to the community was too low relative to the ask, at least initially. And that potentially things were maybe benefiting one entity too much. I think first thing, in terms of entities, Paragon's DAO token stakers are actually the community members of our DAO. And so it's anybody who holds PDT that's not necessarily the DAO treasury. And so that's the first thing in terms of this kind of notion of concentrating rewards too much. The other thing is we went ahead and actually shifted that initial allocation. So as you can notice on the screen, the pre-match versus the post-match, we actually removed all allocations to the Paragon's DAO token stakers initially, and we funneled all of that value to the Echelon sync distribution schedule to start. And that amount will basically be curved relative to the initial upfront and how much we basically match over time. And so, yeah, as Steelhead is motioning towards on the screen, we actually, Melamber went ahead and put together a model for this. So you can actually see the time horizon of which that value accrual is met in the Echelon ecosystem. And that's based on extremely conservative inputs. The second point that was raised was around the concern around sale of Prime tokens to cover expenses and how that might affect maybe price action of the token. Yeah, generally speaking, we think we can fairly reasonably mitigate the need to sell Prime, but I think everybody has experienced the crypto ecosystem in the market in recent months, and yeah, nothing's guaranteed at this point in time. But I think in order to kind of assuage some of the concerns that we heard, we've adjusted the vesting schedule from initially what was 6 months linearly to 12 months. So once again, if you're looking at the model above, you can see that ideally with the amount that we are emitting back to the Echelon sync schedule, the diff in terms of how much Prime we're actually receiving from the grant smart contract versus how much we're emitting back to Echelon doesn't really incur a huge delta over that initial 18-month period. And then like the third piece here was, I think there's been some concerns around using Echelon funds to fund something that also might help benefit other ecosystems. And I think first things first is like a rising tide raises all boats here. I think that we all want to see Echelon become the preeminent game or gaming ecosystem in parallel to the preeminent game. But we don't want to see all Web3 games fail. And so, our team is really invested in making sure that Parallel can realize that direction. And in order to kind of reward and incent the community, we've decided to kind of shift the Prime subscription sync, the priming subscription sync to be Prime exclusively denominated for the first 6 months period. And during this period, we'll accept no other form of payment. Those are kind of the three things that we've changed thus far and some rationale.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, everybody. I know it's a lot to take in, so want to kind of the next couple sections go through, start opening up for questions. I want to do this in order. So first, I want to invite questions about the Explorer portfolio and content elements, but in that order. So I'll prompt that, and then we'll open up broader business, kind of anything goes type of questions for a bit, particularly around bond subscriptions, exclusivity, other things. So with that said, want to try to focus some questions. If anybody has any focused questions on the Explorer in particular, drop them in chat, raise a hand, give a minute to think them up, and then after that portfolio, then after that content. So anybody got any questions? It looks like Jamari's got a couple on subscription. Jamari, we'll revisit that in a few minutes, kind of going into that. But on the actual product side of the proposal, are there any key questions outside of economics or just relative to feature set? I thought maybe there'd be more questions. So what we'll do, Rarity, we'll move on and just kind of open up to more.
I think there's a question there from Jamari.
Yeah. Oh, where is it?
Got his hand up.
Yeah, I think we can just get into some of the product, the user side, and some of the economic elements to it. So yeah, so Jamari, Rarity, I think you can see in the chat. Jamari asked, who's expected to pay for this and how much? What is it based on, assuming assets are under consideration? You want to give some insight to what you guys know about the subscription model at this point?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, in terms of who's expected to pay for this, I don't know if that's referring to our costs to develop the ecosystem, but I'll touch on that really briefly first.
I believe it's up to subscriptions.
For exclusive subscriptions? Yeah, okay. So there's actually a model in the proposal that Melandra was kind enough to put together that outlines all those assumptions. We certainly want there to be a free tier, so I want that to be explicit. There will always be a free tier. In terms of what we think the paid tier will look like, we're hoping that that's very approachable, and right now we've modeled that at about 10 Prime. We want that to stay around the $10 amount. So obviously that's where Prime is at this point in time. And this would be expected to be paid by individual users. I think that there's been some interest from specific bonds as well. And so there might be a world where we actually open up a bond subscription, which would then ensure that all members of that bond have access. That pricing, I don't quite know what it would be.
Great. Thank you. Jamari, looks like you got invited up, so go ahead and ask your question if you have another.
Yeah, hello. Good day, one and all. Jamari. Actually, I just wanted to kind of reiterate a statement, which is, as we're talking about the proposal, I do like the goal of the platform. I wrote this already. I just wanted to say it verbally as well, just make sure it's kind of caught in the recording, I guess, for the future listeners. The thing that stood out to me is really, as you guys mentioned, that content aspect. I personally do advocate for that direction, and that seemed most reasonable and correlating to how utilization might look in the future, because we're embarking upon this new space where you have these new interfaces, and between kind of like the gaming aspect, between financial viability and optimizing kind of what your gameplay looks like to get most yield out of it, but you still have to be good because of the skill-based aspect of some of the games. So I think so when I heard the imputed metadata, the gameplay part, the optimization stuff from the portfolio and the content, those seem to mesh together well. And some of the other parts seemed a little bit like people like number crunching, I guess, some people, but that's not a day-to-day usage, I think, for most users. Whereas when I think about Game Informer, get gameplay, and all the other things I used to look at, I would go for the walkthroughs, for the guides, for the best tips, and watch videos based on that. And I think that has viability. I still pay for my Game Informer now, and I don't even play as much as I used to, but I love to have that access and that preview was coming and the nuts and bolts that other people can't get me. So that's my tidbit.
Thanks, Jamari.
Any other hands right now? See some typing going on. I'll give it a minute. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Brant, I think that's a good question. How realistic is the model? I don't think that's one that can be answered authoritatively. But Melamber, your model does have assumptions noted in the sheet, correct? Okay, yep, they're in the left-hand side of the model. Just wanted to call that attention.
So yeah, anyone can play with that model and put as much of a bull or a bear case to it as they want.
Hey, I have one question just to help with conversation talking about MAUs and stuff. Do you have some general information about what was your kind of average user or monthly average user rate when priming was in full swing? Do you have any just general anecdotal information you can share with people about demand?
Yeah.
Interest?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Some of it is listed at the beginning of the proposal as well. I think during kind of the peak moments where caching and buying pair sets was kind of the issue du jour or the main focus for people, I think we were seeing about 2,700 monthly active users. Obviously, there was no game, so it's hard to benchmark that, and I don't have access to Owner Parallel's Discord activity. But yeah, we were seeing about that. Weekly active retention was also quite nice in terms of people building and interacting with filters. I think we were seeing it was between 70 and 80% week over week retention, which is quite high by any SaaS metric or benchmark, excuse me, not metric.
Great, thank you. Any other EPs, any other questions at this moment? I see a lot of typing going on, so I want to give people an opportunity to type a few questions, but yeah, maybe we'll turn the music back on, I guess. So yeah, Dior, go ahead. We kind of moved from specific questions, don't really have anything about the product and deliverables, so now we're moving into business model, and kind of general questions at this point. So yeah, at this point, any general questions that want to be brought up, let's just bring them up since we've been a little slow on the product and feature set side at this time.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I just wanted to ask about potential marketing for this proposal post-launch, just kind of based, again, on the monthly active users of the priming being slightly under 3,000. And then in the model, it says that the initial monthly is going to be 25,000. So I was just wondering if there's a plan to sort of get that, almost 10x growth.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the model, the 25,000 is based on the number that we expect Parallel Beta to utilize. Then we're taking a 30% conversion rate from that. Sorry, I don't have the model in front of me, but basically, I think the actual monthly active usage rate is far less than that. So what you're reading with the 25,000 is actually with regards to how many we see utilizing the priming beta. Does that make sense, Joe? Does that clarify things?
So
I can actually read it for you.
in the current
25.
priming data, you're
Mhm.
saying it's 25,000 monthly active users?
No. So parallel MAU, that first line item in the model.
Parallel. Okay. Yep.
So it's Parallel's monthly active users. Then we're taking 30% of that and converting that to what we think will utilize the priming in a free manner, which equates 7,500. We think about 7,500 for
Gotcha.
the 3x. But yeah, I think with the beta, we can achieve that being live. And then we have a paid conversion of 7.5% from that 7,500, which would equate about 550 paid users, which I think we can certainly achieve.
Yep. Seems realistic.
Thanks, Joe.
I
We
have
have room on the stage.
a question.
Yeah.
Could you guys talk a little bit more about in that first update in terms of the 50% sync allocation? You talk about curving it down to 25% as sync distributions complete, and you expect that to happen in 18 months. Could you talk a little bit more about how you arrived at that?
Yeah, I think starting with kind of the rationale there, I think what we heard from the community is, hey, we're offering up a large sum initially. When will we kind of see the matched accrual of value come back to the Echelon ecosystem? I think that's where we came up with that relationship between the initial grant amount and mapping that to effectively this curve. We felt that kind of combined with this notion of, hey, you know what, Paragon's DAO as a broader community is accruing a lot of value there. So we felt like that's where it made most sense to take that slice of the pie from in terms of the PDT stakers. And so, yeah, we basically wanted to expedite the value accrual by Echelon to match the kind of goodwill of you guys being willing to help expedite our go-to-market in our platform's build. So that's kind of where we came from in terms of wanting to allocate a greater percent, and why we decided to taper it back to the original sum to, of course, come back to our original vision of an equitable split between all parties that are using our platform. But yeah, we wanted to make sure that we were doing that at a velocity that made sense, given you guys for helping us out initially and helping us kick off our platform. Cole, did that answer the question?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Bounty brings up a question about the expansion and kind of the larger vision for the product. As you expand to other, or Mojak, sorry, as you expand to other gaming ecosystems, how is that going to be handled with token subscriptions and access?
Yeah, so our plan right now is not to support PDT, to start with that last question. Our plan is to support gaming ecosystems denominated native tokens. Or sorry, that was a lot of words. Our plan is to support gaming ecosystems native tokens as the only subscription denominations that we support. So Prime, if another game has a native token, that native token. And the way that it would work is that you would subscribe via one gaming ecosystem. So you would pick your favorite, you would pick whichever token maybe you have the most of, and that's how you would basically kind of align your usage against that gaming ecosystem. So everybody who is paying their subscription in Prime would be flowing value back into the Echelon ecosystem. So that's the way that we see that initially working. Our plan is not to support USDC or ETH initially, but solely to focus on the gaming ecosystem's native tokens to help with that velocity.
Could you unpack maybe a little bit more also on how the content creator sync works? So paying for a subscription, gets you these 3 premium kind of features. One of those is content. How do you envision, maybe unpack a little bit more how you envision that working out within the ecosystem? Because it seems like a large chunk of what you guys are driving at and trying to drive volume and activity. So maybe just help people understand a little more on the content sync and how that plays out.
Yeah, first to clarify, there will be aspects of all of the products within the priming that are free and available. So none of them will be completely gated. We want to make sure that everybody can have a taste of what we're building. In terms of the content piece, I don't think that we can specifically state an exact model at this point in time. I think the 2 things that we are looking at and we've explored already is algorithms based on attribution back to the priming, whether that's using our analytics or diverting user traffic to our platform. And there's a few mechanisms on how we can achieve that. The other one, which unfortunately has been a bit sullied by Arkham's recent developments, has been a kind of a bounty program, which is, hey, you know what, I'm a guild or a bond or an individual who's really curious about a particular question. And how can I maybe post that to have others in the community help answer that? And then obviously reward those contributors who have helped answer that particular user's question. So kind of twofold is the model that we've been exploring thus far. One, which is, hey, I create content, I maybe embed visuals or analytics from the priming, and I divert users to engaging with those analytics, or just viewing other articles or content. And the second is kind of a more ad hoc usage pattern, which is, hey, you know, I maybe have some questions, or I want to browse other people's questions and help answer them, and build a richer community and more well-informed.
Great, thank you. I think Warwick brought up a good question here. You can just read it. I'll just say it out loud for listeners later. My understanding of the paid sub was extra features on top of the 3 current categories. Am I correct here, or the categories itself behind the sub? So, what's the line on the free tier, and as it's currently conceived and relative to the current brand?
Yeah. So right now we are developing with a lot of free features in mind. Though over time things will be gated. The plan is to have all products have an element that is free and an element that is gated, or paid rather. So maybe I'm not understanding that question correctly, but free users will not have access to every single Explorer feature, every single portfolio feature, and every single content feature. Some of those features within each of those products will be required to have a subscription for.
That's clear. Thanks for that answer. All right. Seth, Sean, Gold, anybody got anything you want to ask?
Yeah, I did have one other question. I was wondering, like, how you guys think about Echelon as kind of being, like, in a way, like the parent gaming organization, especially given that this, you know, with the grant, kind of helping to bootstrap the priming, and if there is a path to having any future games, including other tokens, having some amount of accrual back to the Echelon and Prime ecosystem. Because the way I understand it right now is that those would sort of be siloed and segmented out.
Yes. Right now, the model has those value accrual mechanisms siloed to the corresponding games. I think in terms of trying to prioritize Echelon, I think a few things stand out. I think one, the way that we have reconfigured the initial sync schedule on our side to ensure outsized value gets accrued by Echelon. I think the fact that Paragon's DAO, our parent entity, has the vastly outsized treasury weighted in Prime and parallel assets, I think aligns our focus against the Echelon team's focus, and will ensure that we continue to invest quite heavily in making sure that Parallel, for now and potentially other games, have the best infrastructure on our platform. And then finally, I think we want to make sure that this is a democratic experience for users where people don't feel raked from to support a different ecosystem. And I think that will throttle a user adoption from other gaming ecosystems, unfortunately, if they see, hey, you know what, part of my subscription to whatever my gaming ecosystem is getting siphoned. I don't think that makes sense, especially given the fact that, quote unquote, our value max period is quite short, in my opinion. And I think it actually mirrors a decision that Echelon made with the Catalyst Drive, where the Catalyst Drive is specific to the parallel ecosystem. It doesn't rake from every new game that comes onto Echelon, because that's a very hard hurdle to cross in terms of acquiring new entrants and participants in your model. So those would be the two pieces I would mention.
Yeah, no, definitely understandable. And I see Dior's wants to come up. Yeah, just in terms of thinking about getting this through, I imagine that portion, even if it's a really small amount, but just to make it non-zero in terms of having that accrual back to Echelon from any game or any token, could help to be something that gets people over the line. But yeah, makes sense what you said. Just wanted to share that because I've heard that sentiment from some other people as well. Dior, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah. I guess it's more of a kind of clarifier thing because I know a lot of people probably in the audience are people like really gamers and whatnot, but some people just aren't, and they're more in like the crypto space and whatnot, so might not have like a good like how would I say it, like a good comparison to kind of think about what the priming might look like. And Rarity, I asked you about this earlier, and I think you said you agreed with it. So correct me if I'm speaking out of line, but for like the people that are kind of wondering what the site could kind of lean into in terms of like content and analytics, like my best bet or recommendation would be to look at two sites, mainly like maxroll.gg and mobilytics.gg. If you kind of look at kind of how they've structured their site, you see it's a lot of guide information, a lot of kind of wiki almost like information, and a lot of analytics for just like how you play, like all your past games, like each person's like stats and whatnot, like how many kills each person got, like what, champion or character you're playing and whatnot. So for people who are kind of wanting to get a better visualization and whatnot, that would be my recommendation for them to check out. Because I know like some people might just not know kind of what to expect. And again, correct me if I'm kind of out of line in my expectation there.
No, I think that's an apt representation of where we're headed. I think the nuanced difference I would maybe point out is a lot of what we're building is the primitives to allow creators to build those end results. So like, how do we allow somebody to build their own representation of like a meta leaderboard or a set of items to be equipped to a player, or look at, state distributions from equipment minting. We want to give you guys the tools to find those insights yourselves or reward others for finding those insights. And then the tools for also expressing that in words and in writing so that any layman user from another community can access that in a way that's approachable. That's really our goal, is to help provide tools to become really economic and social partners for games, and help their users kind of become more familiar with what's going on. Dior, does that
Yeah. And actually, there's something that I would actually be curious on if, I guess the EPs could maybe at some point ask the Parallel team about because I was curious whether or not the team would be okay with, like, in the future, like third-party apps that interact with the game client. Because, like, for example, like a lot of, like, for like at least League of Legends, for example, there's like a lot of third-party apps and whatnot that while you have them, for example, when you're in your lobby, you can like easily like kind of check the stats of your teammates, or you can it like instantly brings up a guide, or like basically a guide for whatever character you're wanting to use and whatnot. I'd just be curious because that could also be another avenue to go down.
Yeah, I think for right now, we don't have plans for things like in-game overlay and things like that. I think that we have some other things that we're really focused on. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily preclude that from future plans. But I think for right now, I think based on that proposal, we're really focused on those 3 core tenets of our Explorer, the portfolio page, and then obviously all the content guide rails, for allowing people to interface with those in a better way. But I definitely like where your head's going.
Yeah, good discussion. Gonna switch gears a little. Dave and John asked a couple good questions just to help put a fine point on it. Can you give an example of free versus premium in those three categories of Explorer, portfolio, and content? Just shoot from the hip, not taking this as an oath, but can you give everybody an example of what that might look like?
Yeah, I've shared a few of these in the forum already, but just to reiterate, in terms of the Explorer, one such thing that was mentioned is I don't necessarily want to intentionally gate data from free users. So some of the things that we might expect as maybe premium type features would be either certain aggregations or certain comparisons between existing raw data points would be something that might be a premium feature. So users could still do that on their own. But obviously you'd want the convenience of being able to just look at that kind of pre-computed for you. So that's an example in the Explorer, as well as certain visualization types. In the portfolio, things like optimization strategies would be probably premium, which is, hey, you know what, you have a bunch of loose assets. What do you want to do with those? And then in terms of content, you might have certain embeddable types that are available to you, or a limit on how many things you can embed, or how many just generally articles you can produce per period if you're not a paid user. So naturally, both the portfolio and the content piece are things that we're still working towards, and so we have less fidelity in terms of what those roadmaps might look like. But hopefully that gives you a good understanding.
Yeah, I think that helps. Thank you. Will there be API to give access to content for priming users?
I think for right now, that's not part of our core focus. I think Defined is building a pretty awesome product there. And we actually just had a discussion with them yesterday about ways that we can partner in the future, even though we're not using them for our core offering. So yeah, not in the cards for right now, but that's something that maybe we'll entertain in the very long run.
Great, thank you. We have scheduled this to run up until 6. So we have a few more minutes where we can conclude early and have more informal discussion. So kind of getting down to last call for questions.
Yeah, still. Just taking a look at the model again and the conversion rate of 30%. Wanted to see what the assumptions were there. I know Malaber's disclaimed in the comments that a model is a model and assumptions can be changed, but was looking for some clarification on 30% conversion rate.
Just some benchmarks from other quote unquote paid content generation tools and meta analytics offerings out there, as well as just some of my previous history working on SaaS products led us to that 30% mark. It's very hard to tell. We're in pretty nascent and uncharted territory here, and so we tried to go a little bit under the initial figure that we were looking at. yeah, I think our feeling is that most of the initial adoption wave of Parallel will probably be people who come from Web3, who are a little bit more sophisticated, who want to earn the optimized amount that they can. And so having a free tool out there where they can get those insights and leverage them for nothing feels like a pretty compelling value prop. And so we think that we can hit around that number.
That's fair. Part of that exercise, did you look back at holders of cards in relation to peak monthly active users or weekly active users or even daily active users at the time? Was that part of the exercise?
It wasn't just because people's assets are so fanned out, but it would take quite a bit of complex modeling to figure out whose assets are really unique wallets versus not. So we felt that might be a bit of a misleading exercise. But I think in retrospect, had we had more time, that's probably a good strategy and path to go down.
Sure. And I think the key there is that it's a free product.
Yes.
And that conversion rate, 30%. If you're looking for something paid, your numbers are going to be significantly lower.
Yes,
which
much lower,
you've outlined
7.5% of that 30. Yes, exactly.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Looks like content creator revenues and distribution. Mojack's asking about that, and then kind of a follow. How does that going to function? This has been touched on in Discord, but I thought you could just give a quick summary to it, Rarity or Ted. And then I think a really great question for Bounty is, will they be allowed to cross-post to other platforms as well? So 2 questions.
I might touch on the last bit first in regards to cross-pollination, and then lead into kind of the things we're doing, and then Rarity can kind of answer some of those other more financialization questions. So in around like being able to go to other platforms and so forth, like we're talking to a few number of different protocols at the moment, one particularly being Lens, being a social graph platform. If you're not aware about how that works, it allows you to build your social graph at a base level. So for example, it'd be like having a base case of your profile somewhere like that exists on Twitter. But when you went to go and launch on Threads, you had all of your followers, or you had all your content, your profile, everything moved with you, right? So Lens is a base level social graph, and you can build other dApps on top of it. You can build an Instagram on top of it, a Facebook, a Twitter, and these type of monetization, type of content generation tools. So it's definitely one of the leading platforms that we're talking to in regards to integrating that, and it would allow that ability to not only token gate your data from the priming, but also be able to post that onto any of those other decentralized social graph tools. Hopefully that adds some of the distribution mechanics and how the interop works with that content generation. And then I think there was some other questions there, Rarity, just in regards to kind of the usage of the funds and so forth, and how the pool is split up. I mean, realistically, there's probably still a little bit of work to do around the distribution. We do have some ideas and some initial thoughts on how the mechanic will work on that. And we want to try and make that as decentralized and transparent as possible. So it is actually a pool of funds that people can actually see how they earn and how they can affect their earnings as well.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't think the split is known quite at this point. I think there's a bit more modeling that we want to do there. So yeah, in terms of how that 25% gets allocated, it's not written in stone at this point. In terms of whether or not you'll be able to cross-post, I think that this is something that we would definitely want to have actually happen in terms of part of the paid offering. Might get this for free, but in terms of paid, I don't see why that would be something that we would prevent. We want to build a really flourishing creator economy. And that's obviously naturally part of that is creators being able to access their native channels of distribution. So we definitely see that being something that we can do. Warwick asked a question on 25% from content tool features built. It pools and allocates, so we can start to incentivize usage when ready. That's our growth mechanism. Yeah.
Yeah, and another way to look at it is that it's a split from the fees paid that go towards continually putting content and eyeballs on the ecosystem, and we're allowing anyone to come along and generate content that they feel would be palatable to a user group that they're aware of. I think that's really the important part, is that by democratizing that content generating, let anyone to come and try and earn from that, is that you get a lot of different points of views, and you get the opportunity for other people to have different cut through to different communities for the one common goal.
Great, good feedback on this. Coming up on time, so I'll ramble a little bit unless we have any more questions for folks up here. And just kind of going forward, we will be posting a community vote for this in the days ahead, so you guys can look up for that. Official comms will come out in the next few days, hopefully, and the recording will be posted as soon as it renders and get posted up here. EP Council stance on this. Warwick, this meets the guidelines and requests. We've reviewed it, and so it's here because we think it has benefit and merit. So we wouldn't allow something to the stage if we didn't think it would. So the fact that we're up here having this conversation is some level of endorsement for consideration here.
I just had some closing there, Steele, if that's okay, just to kind of round out. So just to clarify as well. So there's we're not a VC group, we're not an investment group, we're a community of gamers. Yeah, and we're governed by a token. Echelon is a token governed ecosystem as well. There's a few of us that obviously are elected via those token holders, just like EPs, and we stand in front of the community and we help make decisions. So we're just a community. So we're also another community group trying to help build tools within this space. And I just want to touch on some of the history of what we've done in this space. So we're the biggest investor in the community investor in the ecosystem. We've got over 36,000 assets in our treasury. And without going too deep into anything else, we've built a suite of tools to help manage those assets, allow users to use them with zero capital. So trying to expand the ecosystem in the play to win space and the competitive space straight away. So we've supported the Prime Prize by including all of our LP with no rewards, including putting backing amounts of ETH at a price point to allow price stability. We've secured the priming after a number of discussions. We initially just tried to fund it, but it quickly turned out that it needed to be taken over, which we were happy to do. We've invested quite a considerable sum in that already, far more exceeding what the grant proposal is today. We've handed out a number of community rewards, be it a PDT, Prime, or parallel prizes, putting on competitions, giving out merchandise. We've extensively engaged in the activities around governance, other tournaments, and other community-driven events within Echelon and Parallel. And we've also worked closely with Parallel and Echelon in regards to ecosystem development and the tools that we're building to help further the game and the aspects from a third-party channel. And then to finalize that, we have a very dedicated team at this group. Our history was a group of founders that were very aligned to the Parallel game. Since then, we have grown a team where 85% of our team now is either a community member within Parallel somewhere, maybe not as active as some as you, but they're still a community member. And we have brought them into the fold to help us build out a strong, robust community support group, basically for this ecosystem and other gaming ecosystems. So I just wanted to touch on some of the important things that we've done over the last nearly 2 years that we've been around. We're not a flash in the pan, and we have got we have a decent amount of runway to continue this, but obviously this grant helps align the support between both Echelon community and ourselves, and will allow us to offset a small amount of the cost as we develop the tool specifically for the Echelon community to start.
Great. Rarity, Ted, thanks for your time. Everybody that's here, thanks for participating. We got a few minutes left, but I think just gonna have a couple closing remarks, and if there's any more questions that come in, we'll take it, but we are gonna have a hard stop here in 4 minutes. So really great discussion. Thanks to the priming team and company for being responsive in Discord. Discord conversation will be ongoing. Official comms about next steps and finalized proposal will come out before probably the next couple days, over the weekend, possibly. Yeah, last questions. I see people typing. Want to wait till that slows down a little bit. But thanks, guys, for coming up, for being here, and we will keep moving this forward through the funnel. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Cole, you can kill that recording.
Will do.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Rarity. Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, everyone.
Later, guys.